Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first in an exciting series of distinguished speakers here at Temple Beth Shalom. We're especially grateful to our esteemed Rabbi, Stuart Altshuler, for his special efforts to bring these amazing individuals to our community. Special thanks to TBS and Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee for their co-sponsorship of today's program. Finally, a hearty Todah Rabbah to our host, Elliot Korn, and co-host Marshall Horwitz for their technical expertise. At this point, I'd now like to turn to Rabbi Altshuler, who will introduce our distinguished speaker.
Thank you, Al. Good morning, everybody. This is exciting, the first of our many distinguished speakers program, and there can't be anybody more distinguished and better able to inaugurate this than my dear friend, Ambassador Eitan Na'Eh, Israel's first ambassador to the UAE, United Arab Emirates. I've known Ambassador Naeh for it's been almost 30 years. We met in Chicago when he was with the consul. We were very young then, had a lot more hair and no gray. And we were discussing the Oslo Accords heatedly in synagogue every Shabbat. We really developed a wonderful relationship. And lucky us, after he went to all the other places, he was ambassador, he went back to Israel, and then he happened to become the deputy ambassador of the United Kingdom, and we were able to resume our wonderful friendship with Eitan Na'Eh and his lovely wife, Cheryl. We had wonderful times together. You have his distinguished biography. He's been ambassador to the countries of Azerbaijan and Turkey, and now the UAE. And I'm a little bit biased, but there is nobody who has represented our beloved state of Israel better than Ambassador Naeh. He has a long, distinguished career. He's upheld the banner of our people, of our tradition, of our history. He's knowledgeable about all Jewish affairs and background and heritage. And it is a real honor. I don't want to speak any longer, but it's a real kavod bishvili, an honor for me to introduce Ambassador Eitan Na'Eh to my new family here in Sarasota. Ambassador Naeh, please. Thank you very much. We would all be rising at this point if we could. I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Stuart. Indeed, a dear friend. And, we are still in an age where we remember things, so nothing was forgotten from our days in Chicago. Rabbi Altshuler has performed the service during my son's Brit Milah, and that has been more than 23 years ago. So let me share with you some of the feelings, the thoughts, and what's happening around the Abraham Accords as we speak. It was clear to me personally when I heard about the Abraham Accords that I want to be part of it, that I want to go to Abu Dhabi. I was free. I finished my term in Turkey in an unceremonious way. I was asked to leave in 2018. Officially was still the ambassador until summer 2019. And then did one or two things in the ministry, but was basically available. So when the accords were signed, I went up to the minister and said, "Hineni, send me." And indeed, I was sent here at the end of January to be the first official Israeli representative as a chargé d'affaires or head of mission, not fully accredited ambassador here due to the political situation in Israel at the time. And the decision now by the foreign minister to appoint here what we call a political appointee. That means not a career diplomat. So I'll be leaving here in about 2 weeks on my way to become the first ambassador to the Kingdom of Bahrain. But back to the United Arab Emirates, the Abraham Accords are a dream come true. They are a vision, a strategy, and a road not taken yet to normalize relationships with other Arab countries and to create a model for others and a catalyst for many other countries and peoples across the region and across the Muslim world, and indeed across the world, Lifnei Kuli Alma, of normal relationships between the Jewish state, Israel, and an Arab state, in a way that we never had before. We spoke a lot in the 90s and 80s, and ever since we signed the peace accords with Egypt, Jordan, tremendously important peace accords, strategic in nature. I would say the peace accord with Egypt and certainly with Jordan are the most important agreements we ever signed. But normal relationships we did not have. We did not have relationships with all parts of the country, whether it's the leadership, the bureaucracy, the press, the elite, the media, and the people, the men and women in the streets. And this is exactly what happened here as soon as we embarked upon, as soon as the Abraham Accords were signed. Every government ministry in Israel are in touch with their counterparts at the United Arab Emirates. There are plenty of cooperation programs. There are already a number of agreements that were signed in anything from cooperation between the national archives in sharing data and technologies to soon to be signed space cooperation. We'll cooperate in moon missions and hopefully even beyond. Space research. Our Minister of Science and Technology will arrive here later next month. Next week we have 3 ministerial visits from climate change and environment to interior to tourism, to open our pavilion at the Expo exhibition, Expo 2020 in Dubai. A very exciting moment, a very magnificent and exciting Israeli pavilion, an open Abrahamic tent, Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, as we say, open to all with a vision towards tomorrow. We are trying now to, in spite of COVID, which makes life a bit difficult for everybody, but also to diplomatic relationships. We can't send delegations, exchange delegations the way we wanted. But we try now to concretize the G2G or the government-to-government relationships. At the same time, we are trying to push forward with our commercial and economic relationships. We signed few agreements. Economic cooperation was signed by the foreign minister. Free trade agreement with the Emirati eyes towards Israel and its special relationships with America. Our free trade agreement with America carries with it many benefits for the United Arab Emirates in some sectors, which we are now starting to explore. Prevention of double taxation and investment and the protection of investments. And free trade agreement will be very interesting to start negotiating and obviously to sign. The numbers already show a trajectory that will bring the United Arab Emirates to a volume of trade that will put it amongst the biggest 10 trading partners of the State of Israel. And this is all in less or just in a year, the first year of the relationships. If that continues, and next week I'm attesting to some papers on project and size of $1 billion to invest in gas in the Mediterranean, buying shares in Israel's second largest gas field. Who would have thought that an Emirati wealth fund will own 20% of Israel's second largest gas field? There are more projects on the way, more investment projects on the way. We will have to learn and teach ourselves and change the way we do things as part of this process. The synergy between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, the most developed and liberal Arab country, maybe a part of Bahrain, is huge. Almost in every field there is a synergy, whether it's agriculture and artificial intelligence, cyber, anything with tech. The Emiratis want to make the United Arab Emirates a hub, a regional hub, an Arab hub to everything tech. And therefore Israel is a very relevant partner and a willing partner. We have huge trade delegations coming here in the middle of next month, 250 Israeli CEOs and chairmen of boards of the biggest Israeli companies are coming here, followed by many others in November. Mayors, heads of local authorities, the mayor of Tel Aviv, the head of the Israeli Local Authority Council is also here. We're talking about smart cities and safe cities and whatnot. There is no subject that we don't touch. This is fully normalized, on the way to be fully normalized relationships. It doesn't come without hiccups, as everything that just starts and two people that just meet and need to get to know each other better. We need to learn more about the United Arab Emirates, the Emirati way of doing things. They are learning about the Israeli way of doing things. Yalla Yalla doesn't translate well into the Emirati Arab dialect. But we are learning. We understand that there will be a period where we both learn about each other. Going from the bilateral to the regional, we just saw yesterday 300 Iraqis convene in North Iraq and calling the governments to normalize relationships with Israel. I'm getting messages from all over the place, from the Arab world and Muslim world. Ambassador, what can we do to bring Israel together to the Muslim people? That can be Sufi sects leaders and tribe leaders from across the Middle East, from India's Muslim communities, all the way to Morocco, Mauritania, across the region, across the MENA region. And here, I want really you to listen very carefully to what I say, because there was a lot of criticism leveled at the Abraham Accords. And there are calls to go and concentrate on the Palestinian track, and we should. Nobody forgot the Palestinian track. But we think that the Abraham Accords will be a catalyst for normalizations of relationship with other Arab countries and Arab people. We wish to create a notion of others asking their leadership, why not us? Why only them? The Emiratis and the Bahrainis, the Moroccans, and hopefully soon also the Sudanese and others. We already see some movements. People are looking at what Israel and the United Arab Emirates are doing. We want to create success stories. We want others to see, and yes, to get a bit envy, and to push forward the relationships between them and Israel. And we think that that's the way that will push the Palestinians, the Israeli-Palestinian track, to a better start, a more realistic start that can actually bring us and enable us to talk peace, make peace, and live in peace. So more cooperation, more normalization, more cooperation, and will bring more peace. We are very excited. You can see it in Israel. You can see it in the 230,000 Israelis that already came here. You see it in a number of flights, and more will be opened in November from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Israeli Airlines, Emirati Airlines, and the Egyptians are following through, and Egypt Air, for the first time in 42 years, is going to open a line from Cairo to Tel Aviv. That's a first. Clearly influenced by the Abraham Accords, and more is happening. Not everything that we can talk about, but more is happening. And therefore, to the midterm to long term, we are pretty optimistic. And what we need are friends and allies to support it, to understand what it means, and to understand that this is another model of peacemaking. We tried, Rabbi Altshuler spoke before about Oslo, we tried. We want to continue to try, but we want to continue to try it under different circumstances with other Arab countries around us, already living in peace with us, in full normalized relationships. That is what we try to do here. Myself, my colleagues at the Foreign Office and in other government offices, together with our new Arab friends. So thank you, and certainly I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Na'Eh. There are a few questions here. The first question is, does the UAE recognize sovereignty of Israel over East Jerusalem?
No. The answer is no. Fully aligned with other Arab countries. But disagreement aside, we decided to put it aside. We are talking about it. They are voicing their opinions in the multilateral forums, but we are still making our relations strong in spite of disagreements. This is a topic we don't agree with, but the UAE is not the only country we don't agree with on that one.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and this was actually two people asked this question. What Arab countries do you think are likely to be next in line in establishing similar relationships? I can tell by the grin that you obviously knew this question was coming, and so we're ready to hear what you have to say.
The truth is, I don't know. I can pretend and say I know, but I cannot tell you, but that's not true. I simply don't know. It's really up to them. We can see some movements. I told you about Iraq. There are other countries who once had relationship with Israel in one way or another, but we are talking to many other Arab countries. We are talking to almost all other Arab countries. It's not yet there, but I cannot answer that question, unfortunately. Not yet.
Okay, next question. Is there a difference between how this Israeli government and the previous Israeli government is dealing with the Abraham Accords?
No, not really. I think that both governments or any Israeli government understands the importance of these accords, understand the importance of pushing forward. The new foreign minister came in and worked immediately to install 2 new ambassadors, appointed 1 ambassador here to Abu Dhabi that will arrive on shortly, and myself living here and going to Manama, Bahrain in a short time. So no, there's no difference.
Okay, another question from Joel Servitz. As you were the former ambassador to Turkey, do you see any path to reestablishing the previously good relations between Israel and Turkey?
Yes, of course. Turkey is a very important country. It's a country with a lot of potential. There are a lot of aligned interests, potentially, that the 2 countries have and can have together. The issue is not about whether the interest exists or not, is whether the 2 countries recognize them and acting upon it. At the moment, it doesn't happen. At the moment, we are still not there yet, but hopefully in the future, we will be. We were there in the 90s. Just before I came to Chicago, I was 4 years in Ankara, working very hard in normalizing and establishing new relationships with Turkey. We worked around the clock. We were very close and intimate friends. The intimacy was second only to our relationships with the United States of America. or at par with our relationships with Germany. Turkey said then, the Deputy Foreign Minister, was one of the 7 most important countries to Israel's foreign relationships. We have more friends today. We have other friends that we didn't have in the 90s. But still, when circumstances will allow, we will certainly be happy to upgrade again our relationship with Turkey, to send a full ambassador. But it's not just up to Israel. It certainly is up to Turkey and the way it sees its relationship with Israel, its interest in the region, and the way it behaves towards Israel and its official representatives.
A question from Susan Winarski. Do you care to comment on the practical effect of the recent Iraqi Kurdish statement?
That's a very good question. We're asking ourselves the same question, and I'm not sure we yet have an answer to that. One thing is very clear. The issue is debated in the very heart of the Arab world. And you are for the Abraham Accords, you are against the Abraham Accords, you are neutral. You cannot ignore the fact that a year ago, that was not an issue that was debated at the heart of the Arab world, one of the cradles of the Islamic civilizations, Iraq, with all its troubles. So is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Next week? Probably not. But it's being debated. It's out there. And let's see what happens. But the issue has been brought up. It's debated, and it's clearly an aftershock, if you want, in search of a better world to the Abraham Accords. So we probably are doing something good, or have been doing something good.
Okay, a question about Saudi Arabia, Ambassador. Could you tell us what you think the state of relationships between Israel and Saudi Arabia is, and the exchange of diplomats?
Your guess will be as good as mine. Again, a very important Arab country, the biggest here in the Gulf. Hopefully it will happen. Hopefully it will happen sooner rather than later. Saudi Arabia is undergoing some serious reforms and reforms that are relatively new and are important, not without problems, not without opposition. They are not yet a Western European democracy, and I doubt whether the model of government here will be similar to anything we know in the Western world. But it's important to see what is happening in Saudi Arabia. There are forces there who are calling for normalized relationship with Israel. I was just a week ago, on the 17th of September, been interviewed to one of the Saudi-owned magazines, El Majalla, by a journalist working for the magazine. It's part of the Al Sharq Al Awsat group, a very big Saudi daily. They want to interview more Israelis and more people who support peace and dialogue and tolerance and mutual understanding, and to see the face of the other Israel, not the Israel of war and security and terror. So if you take all of it together and you add to the mix the fact that our Arabic pages in social media worked out of Jerusalem are being viewed by hundreds of millions of Arabs across the region. You cannot ignore the fact that something is happening, something that was not there only a couple of years ago. I think that post-Arab Spring and the chaos that it brought with it within the Arab world, and you know, the failed state from Somaliland, from Somali to Yemen, Libya and Syria, made the Arabs realize, many Arabs realize, that the source of the problems in the Middle East is not Israel, and not necessarily the Israeli-Arab conflict, but there are many other problems that, with the help of Israel, can be at least begin to be tackled. And this we see in the conversations, it's not yet a majority, it's not yet something that is going to happen, it's not a definite trajectory, but we can see it bubbling. And these are encouraging signs, and I would recommend everybody to support it, to support this kind of developments, because they will eventually lead to a different Middle East and different type of relationship between Israel and the Arab world.
The questions are coming in fast and furious, so I will ask this one. What is the status of the Jewish community in the UAE? And do you also think that there may, over time, be an Israeli expat, for lack of a better word, presence in the UAE, similar to the Israeli presence in Shanghai?
Well, there are quite a few Israelis here already, and more are moving. They're coming from tech sectors. Some of them live here in Abu Dhabi, and some are already in Dubai. There are Israeli businessmen who are moving here, and the Israeli businesses that are being opened here, and even Israeli kosher restaurants. There are at least 4, the last time I counted, kosher restaurants in Dubai. There are 4 minyans in Dubai. The Jewish community is growing. There is a synagogue that is going to be built here in Abu Dhabi, the first licensed synagogue in the UAE. Headed by Rabbi Levi Duchman. There is another community or communities led by Rabbi Eli Abadi from New York and Rabbi Serna from New York. I'm sure that the more Israelis and more everybody coming here, we'll see more Jews and more Jewish life and Jewish families. We celebrated Passover in the desert with our Emirati, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish friends. We celebrated Sukkot and Kabbalat Shabbat every week, every Friday, with Muslims, Christians, and Jews in hotels. Kosher food is a must. Every hotel must be able to serve kosher food here in the United Arab Emirates. We had a very big Rosh Hashanah service, followed by a big community dinner of more than 100 people here in Abu Dhabi. Similar events take place in Dubai. So Jewish life is growing, thriving, and we have Jews here from South Africa, Australia, UK, US, France, Switzerland, Israel. Why not? So Jewish life here is as free. Jews feel here safe. In fact, some of them tell us they feel safer here than in any other place in the world today.
Wow. Ambassador, question from the chat. How was the coverage in the last Israeli-Hamas conflict in the UAE media? What was the tone of that coverage?
Well, in the UAE, I think the tone was very much probably what you would see. I'm trying to do something really to describe it in a different way. So if I make a mistake, please forgive me. No offense, but I think very much the way that the American Jewish community would see or saw the Iraqi war with when missiles were lobbed at Israel. People are sharing the grief of their brethren. They don't like to see people getting killed on both sides, by the way, of course. So there is that. There is those pictures are not nice to watch, no matter who you are. But the process does continue, and the normalization continued. I don't think that it went. Of course, they felt something towards what is happening. They prayed for the Palestinians. They sent aid for the Palestinians. There is not much else that they can do, given the present leadership, the Palestinian leadership in Gaza, led by terrorist Hamas, part of the Muslim Brotherhood that also threatens the UAE as a movement. And they also have disagreements with the Palestinians in the West Bank, which I hope that they will overcome one way or another. So I think there were mixed feelings, ambivalence, but as I said, the normalization process is the strategic decision here taken by the leadership here, and it continues.
That actually leads into the next question. And considering the interaction between some of the more radical Arab segments like the Hamas and so forth, and their ties to the Iranians and the threat to the UAE, the question was presented, do you see a military alliance with the UAE to deal with Iran? Would you ever see a tie between the Israeli military and the UAE military to deal with the threat of Iran?
First of all, we live in a region full of challenges and threats to regional security, not just for the Israel's national security, but to other countries' national security. So I think there is an alignment of some interests. It may express itself in different ways, different reactions, but I think that talking about military alliance are premature. I don't think that this is what we are going to see, but we are certainly have the same, or some of the same concerns. In a deeper conversation with more time, I would go and elaborate on the heat of every threat, how much of a threat it is for us or for them. But that's, I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
We certainly have concerns about regional security and regional threats.
Here's a question which was posed. Not every party to the Abraham Accords openly supported Israel in Operation Guardian of the Walls. Did this cause you any difficulties in your role as ambassador?
No, I did not expect them to support Israel in its Gaza campaign. As I said before, it did create, I'm sure, some feelings. People have to remember that the United Arab Emirates has 10 million people. Only about 12 to 15% of them are Emiratis, and the rest are expats from 204 different countries, nations, ethnic groups, Muslims from India, Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, Egyptians, Moroccans, etc. So, level of satisfaction is the difference between expectations and reality. There was no expectation to get a support. They supported peace. They were sorry to see the death from both sides, and they hope that it will end very soon, which indeed it had ended very quickly, relatively quickly.
Okay. This just popped up. As relations between Israel and a growing number of Arab nations continue to solidify, do you see a time when Israel will be willing to sell military hardware to their former enemies? That was posted up. So I will just ask that question.
In one word, yes.
Okay. All right. And here's a lighter question, Ambassador, something to just take the heat off of you a little bit. I'm sure many of us would like to know this. I would as well. This question was posed also by Susan Winarski. Professionally, what is your day like? What do you do? So after you go to the kosher restaurant in the morning for some breakfast, and then you go to Chabad for the minyan, and then you go to the sukkah, what occupies your day for the rest of the week, Ambassador?
A lot of meetings with my Emirati colleagues, getting to know the Emirati government system. Last week, I met the Minister of Culture, who was very enthusiastic about cultural cooperation. We have Expo starting and a lot of ministerial visits, so there's a lot of technical work to be done in preparation of these visits. writing official letters, asking for meetings, fixing meetings, some desk work, some leg work, trying to really, we are a very, very small embassy. We are not yet fully staffed. We are waiting for the annual budget to pass. And then we will start seeing more Israelis, more diplomats coming our way, whether it's not just a new ambassador, but a deputy ambassador and commercial attaché and police attaché and military attaché and agriculture attaché and economic attaché. I mean, and the same in more or less the same in Dubai with more consular staff. So it's really building an embassy. It's making sure that we have places to live for all the new people that are coming, registering to school, taking care of our medical needs should they hope not rise, and creating an ecosystem in which a fairly large embassy in Israeli standards of probably 40 to 50 people will be able to work and function. And all that in setting targets and goals, and then connecting people, connecting ministries and entities and financial entities and businesses. So it's a lot of work, but it's not different than any new company that set itself and look for. It's a company, you'd call it customers. We call it connections.
So when you're up and running, fully staffed ambassador, you think you'll have about 40 to 50 people there. Is that your number, you think?
This is what we want. God is in the details, and God is called the Ministry of Finance.
Okay. Then there was another question, and that is the average person on the street, the average fellow walking down the street. What is his attitude towards Israelis, to the Israeli government, to what's going on right now? Is he ambivalent? Is he looking forward to better relations, or is there still a hostility from way back when? The average fellow, what do you think he's like?
Let's define average. As I said to you, 90% of people here are from all over the Middle East and beyond. There are 80,000 Canadians. There are 110,000 Britons. There are I don't know how many Americans, and there are 3.5 million Indians, and everybody else. The people I see here are from all over the Middle East. I've got Lebanese friends that I spend a lot of time with. I've got friends, Palestinian friends. I've been hosted at Palestinian homes during Ramadan for the break of fast meal, the iftar. I'm not sure we would have done the same thing had we met each other in Nablus or East Jerusalem, but they are from Nablus and East Jerusalem. We are working together, talking together, and planning an economic future together and investments together. They are now working for Emirati entities. The average Emirati, and as I said, there are about maximum 1.5 million Emiratis here. I think most of them support more enthusiastically or less enthusiastically. I haven't asked all of them. The Abraham Accord, they trust the leadership. They trusted them for so many years. This country will celebrate its 50th anniversary in December. It's gone through tremendous change and development, so the people trust the government. It's a beneficiary government. They live well here, or relatively well. So the average person in the street, when I first came here, went to a restaurant, people heard that the Israeli head of mission is in the restaurants. I got cakes sent to my table. People invited me home. People told me that it's the first time that they are hearing about the Israeli-Arab or Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the Israeli side, face to face, something that they in the past only saw on television. You can move around the street here with a yarmulke on your head. Not only should the young people not be afraid, it's an attraction. You are more likely than not to attract conversations from young Emirati women who will be very interested in Judaism and to learn about Judaism. They are learning Hebrew. They are asking for invitations for Shabbat dinners. So it's everything that, or it's nothing that one would expect normally when you talk about Jewish life in an Arab country. It's a new world. It's a new reality for us.
Well, I can assure you, Ambassador, if you come to Sarasota, you'll have plenty of invitations, okay? You don't have to worry about that. I'm sure there's a whole host of people right now that would be ready to send you some cake and an invitation. So here's a question which I'd like to push forward to you. What can we in the rest of the world outside Israel do to continue the positive movement toward peace among nations, the Abrahamic Accords, and beyond? What is our role as American Jews?
I think to support it, to support these efforts by many ways. First of all, from within the US, to explain the Abraham Accords, to explain what you heard from me now about the new reality that it's created on the ground. And probably we would have seen a completely, even more so, had we not had to deal with COVID. We would have seen plenty of Emirati tourists roaming the streets of Tel Aviv and its restaurants. Remember that kosher food is also kosher for Muslims. They are very curious about visiting Israel, very curious about the culture and religion. And I think that's probably the first thing to do is to explain. I mean, sometimes people still talk in old terms. They talk about the boycotts, they talk about the plight of the Palestinians. Look what happened when an Arab country and Israel are cooperating. I say it often, 1 + 1 = at least 3. We are now going to open here in December, I hope, the first production factory that will produce machines that make water from the air. You put them in parks, on the beaches, in the desert, in office, at homes, in apartment buildings. It sucks the air, separates the hydrogen from oxygen and makes water from the air, no piping. This is an ingenuity. This is Israeli ingenuity that will come here together with Emirati researchers and engineers to make it work in 70 degrees heat or 60 degrees heat and to keep the water cold, or to make it work on solar power. And it's happening. And everybody who knows anything about the desert knows how important water are for sustainability and existence and security and national security. So this is one thing that we do here, and we do many more things. We help with agriculture. We help with, we came here to teach and we came here to learn. There's a lot that we can learn here. And I think that this story should be told. That's one thing. Tell it to your elected officials, if you may. Tell them to come and see for themselves. What is this new reality? What does it mean on the ground? That is important. We need the US support and momentum to continue it and to carry it throughout the region and to other countries.
Now, actually, that just leads into the next question. You said you mentioned the word support just about 40 seconds ago. What support do you hope to get from the current United States government? What can the United States do in terms of what is the concrete support that you're looking for?
I think that everybody still look at the US as you know, the big country, the big ally. They want the US support. They want the US attention in supporting the process, in continue the process, and continue the momentum to carry it to other countries. The US carries a lot of weight here in the region. We know what the US did in order to make the Abraham Accords happen. I am not going to go into American politics, but I think that this is a bipartisan issue. And I think that it has already created a lot of change in the region, and therefore supporting this change, pushing it forward, pushing it to other countries, encourage other countries to follow is a great thing to do.
Okay,
I don't have a
well,
recipe of what to do. I'm far from telling the Americans what to do, but I think that it's clear that the region and us and the process need a lot of American support.
There's another question. Since you mentioned Lebanon, I realize this question may be outside your specific domain, but that's all right. We'll take this question anyways, because we figure you must have enough knowledge to be able to point us in the right direction. Since you mentioned Lebanon, do you see a path to Israel and some faction within Lebanon establishing relations that could lead to better security on the Lebanese-Israeli border that eventually would lead to this displacement of Hezbollah?
I don't know. Can't see it happen in a few years that I have left before I retire. And it's almost 10 years ahead. But I don't know. Lebanon won't be the next first country to sign peace accord with Israel. But you know, I'm sitting next to the German ambassador. I'm sitting next to my Emirati friends. And what do I know about what will happen in the next few years? Let's be humble. This is the Middle East, and things can change rapidly. We're not always in a position to foresee it. And our recent history showed us that usually when things happen, we got surprised. From the fall of the Soviet Union to Abrahamic Accords and the Arab Spring. We'll deal with it when it comes.
Well, that just about wraps up all the questions and answers. Questions. You have the answers. I just have the questions. And I want to thank you very much for your candor. I want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. And at this point, I'm going to turn the program back over to our president, Eric Ferber, for some remarks. And thank you once again. And we appreciate all of your time and wish you nothing but success in your future endeavors. Thank you on behalf of Temple Beth Shalom. And come on down and get some sunshine. We have plenty of space here.
You'll know when I'm coming. Stuart will know if I happen to come to Florida. I will have to leave you. I'm dashing to Dubai for dinner to say goodbye to friends from the Jewish community there. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Stuart, for your friendship, of course, and to bringing me to talk here in front of your community.
All I can say, Eitan, we'll be there. Thank you. You're making history. This was tremendous, as everything you do. So just keep it up. I love you dearly. Ella sends her love to you and Cheryl, and we hope to see you soon. Lahatzlacha. Chag Sameach.
Good evening. Good evening, Ambassador Naeh. On behalf of the congregation of Temple Beth Shalom here in Sarasota and the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee, and also the greater Jewish community of Sarasota Manatee and beyond, we are extremely honored and privileged to have you make this presentation to us today. I believe, following our previous conversation this morning, that this is in fact a historic event here in Sarasota, because we are the first congregation in America to be addressed by you. And we thank Rabbi Altshuler for being the catalyst in organizing this for us. It's hard to believe that a whole year has already passed since the historic signing of the Abrahamic Accords. We thank you for your superb presentation. We have learned so much from your insights, and it's amazing and very exciting to hear about all the things that are going on in the UAE at present. We here in Sarasota stand tall with Israel. We are proud of your achievements and Israel's accomplishments. This accord is one of the major milestones since the creation of the State of Israel. We hope in future that we will again be privileged to have a further update from you. Perhaps, who knows, there will even be a Temple Beth Shalom congregational visit to the UAE. So we hope to have future updates from you. We thank you once again.
Manama. To
We thank
Manama. I'm moving to Manama.
We thank you once again for the great honor in addressing us. And again, we send you our very best wishes for your continued success. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.